Today I'm joined by Kirk Beck. Kirk, how's it going?
Doing well out here. Thank you.
Cool. And Kirk, we were talking a little bit before the show, deciding what we're going to go over. And Kirk is in California, and beautiful, beautiful place there. So the standard question I ask folks: who is Kirk Beck? What kind of work does he do?
Kirk was born 75 years ago in South Dakota, and I graduated from South Dakota Tech. Um, had a great opportunity to play football at a small college, and got involved in what later became the upset of the decade. A really great football game that I'll never forget. From South Dakota, I moved to Colorado. I worked for Shell Oil Company for a while, and I married my wife there. And I um, had a vocational change. I really didn't enjoy what I was doing. I ended up becoming a teacher. And for the last 40 years, I've been teaching mathematics, and occasionally I get to teach civics. And I've probably worked with a couple thousand kids over that time, and I've really enjoyed working with these kids, and I've kept in touch with a lot of them as well over the years. Some of them are in their 40s, 50s now, but I really enjoy working with people. Um, while I was in Colorado, I had a situation at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm traveling home, and a patrolman pulled me over at 2 o'clock in the morning, and what is this about? I said, well, you just made a rolling stop. At 2 o'clock in the morning, there's nobody around. Well, you can't do it anyway. I got a ticket. Well, that was the beginning of the process. I was never very political in my life, but this legal question was bothering me because at the same time I also thought, well, where's this money going? Um, but like a lot of people, I paid the fine and I just continued. But then when I moved to California, it started to happen a lot more. There's just a lot more police out here or something, but I was starting to get these rolling stops every couple of years. And every time I went to court and I learned more, I often say I learn law by doing law. I go to court and I argue, and I'm always polite and nonviolent, but nevertheless, I kept getting a greater curiosity of how law really works. And I'm out here in California for 36 years. I've got three boys that are now young men, of course. And I, I have finally come to the understanding of how this thing really works. Not that I'm anywhere near where I'd like to be, but I'm so much farther along than where I was, and so much farther along than where the average American is, that I find a sense of peace now that I understand how the system largely works. Now, this happened to me because I was on a jury pool, and I was sitting right behind the defendant, and he objected to something. He was defending himself against 17 felonies. Wow, this is pretty exciting. This guy could be in jail for a long time, and he's defending himself. He made a statement, and the judge reprimanded him and said, sir, you had an opportunity to have a lawyer. You've chosen not to have a lawyer. Therefore, dot, 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 dot. And the whole time that he's reprimanding the defendant in front of 60 people, the defendant is shaking his head. And I'm starting to think, I wonder what's going on here. I've got an idea, because I'd been in court before, that he doesn't want to lose his opportunity to defend himself. If he has an attorney representing him, then he basically got to keep his mouth shut in court. He can only speak if he's spoken to. What he probably wants is to have an attorney be a counselor to him so that he can continue to do what he believes is the proper thing in his defense. Well, 2 days later, I'm over there, one of the 16, and the judge goes through his caveats, and as soon as he gets done, he looks at me and he says, juror number 14, I can see by your body language you're having some problems with what I'm saying. And I said, yeah, there's a couple things that have been going on here the last 2 days that are troubling to me. And one of them had to do with the 2 days ago when you were reprimanding the defendant, he was making very clear to anybody who's watching him that he was not agreeing with what you were saying. So I basically made my point for like 3-5 minutes. He gave me the courtroom. And I said, I think he wants to have his own defense. He just wants a counselor with him. Well, when I got done with that and another point, the judge said, I think we'll take a 15-minute break. We came back and immediately the judge said, Mr. Beck, you've been dismissed. You can go. Well, he didn't call me by my name, but he said, Juror 14, you can leave. Well, Juror 14 left, but Juror 14 did something no other juror probably does. He came back the next day and sat right behind the defendant. Because I'm semi-retired, I've got time. I want to find out what's going on here. So I took the defendant out for lunch, and sure enough, I was right. He had gone out with an attorney to see whether they could work together. They came back into the courtroom, and unbeknownst to the defendant, when the judge asked the attorney if they could work together, he stood up and he said, Your Honor, based upon my observations, I think I would order a complete psychiatric evaluation for the defendant. Totally blindsided the defendant. The defendant had no idea he was going to say that. So that's when I then found out what was really going on. And he told me about Jack and Margie Flynn. The Flynns are in Arkansas, and they've been battling the courts for 6 decades. And basically, I became a student of the Flynn, and I've learned so much. Now, I would say here that those who listen to this interview, I will have a free gift for them at the end. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the Flynns took me under their wing, and I began to learn something called what I now call the power of paper. And it's been a tremendously insightful and I think an uplifting experience to me, because I realized that the founding fathers gave America, the American people, something profoundly different than anywhere in the world. There have been other countries that have tried to model what we have here, but they haven't been as successful. Now, maybe today we'd say, well, we're not very successful either, because we've largely lost much of what we had even as 60, 70, 80 years ago. Our country has changed drastically. And Josh, that usually happens right after or during and after wars. What happened in the Civil War, the country was never exactly the same after the Civil War. After World War I, what took place, our country came out a different country. And after World War II, even more so. And then look at us ever since. We've been in a constant state of war all these many decades, and our country continues to become more broken up, and more hostility and violence. People wonder about all the killings that take place in the United States. And I often say, well, it's not the guns, because Switzerland's got a lot of guns and they're not killing each other. But you keep sending our young men and women overseas to kill people, and then they come home. And they don't adjust very well to a world that's rather indifferent to all the killing. And they become fathers and mothers, and they're not the same people they were before they went off to war. So much of the violence we have in our culture today is because we've been constantly for 3 decades involved in wars and sending our young men and women overseas to kill people. And these are people who have they're no threat to us at all. it is as Henry Kissinger said in the book The Final Days of Richard Nixon. He turned to General Hagen. He said basically, soldiers are stupid pawns, only good for foreign policy. Yeah, unfortunately, that's what most of our military is today. It's just going overseas to make sure that our foreign policy and our economic system that basically enhances a very small percentage of the American people continues to be defended and expanded. I
Kirk, I
say to
could go
go
ahead. Go,
ahead.
please continue. Yeah.
I was just going to say, if you want to know why there's so many people out in South America and Central America trying to get into the United States, you just find out. Read John Perkins' book, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and
Yes,
find
I'm
out what
familiar.
we've done to Guatemala, what we've done to Honduras, what we've done to Panama, Ecuador. It's seriously, um, we're exporting war, violence, and corruption overseas for the benefit of huge corporations, the CIA, and the World Bank. And until at least a critical number of Americans understand what's going on, we're going to have a great amount of difficulty changing our system.
Couldn't agree more. It's a classic book. I've heard interviews with him too, and this old axiom: all wars are banker wars. A lot of them started with false flags under bad premises and false pretenses, and with the funding both sides for profit, and the economy, runs on war. I mean, maybe that's an oversimplification. I shouldn't say that exactly, but and it's nothing against veterans because a lot of them, like you're saying, they have no idea what they're getting into, really. So it can't really blame them so much. This notion. I'll just give a really for people that aren't familiar with the Confessions of an Economic Hitman. From what I understand, is you have him who works for the IMF, and he will go into developing nations and offer them like a huge deal, saying, or sometimes they get forced into a deal, or say, if you don't do that, well, then we can send in like the CIA and take out the leadership. But they say, we'll put in some infrastructure, we'll put in a power plant, a hydroelectric dam, roads, whatever, that's going to make your country well off, knowing full well the whole time that they won't be able to pay the loan. So they give them the loan, and what they do is then they contract it out to their cronies. So their cronies get rich on this loan. They build the infrastructure. Then when the loan comes due, they can't pay it. So they say, oh, that's no big deal. We'll just take over the infrastructure for you, and then we'll own the infrastructure. And so then they have basically owning a lot of the, I guess, that part of the country, right? And it happened to get again and again. And I don't think I'm telling that 100% right, but the book is free and it's out there. Now, going back to the court thing, I don't have much experience in this. When I've gone, I'm kind of the opposite. I've got called into jury duty, I think 2 or 3 times, and I never got selected, right? They could tell right away that, so, and then another anomaly, but so I've never got chosen for a jury thing. And so I want to see how this ties in. What you say is really going on in the court system. Does that tie in to, this bigger picture of war? And from what I understand, some people are talking. I've listened to this long series of interviews on Crow 777 radio, and he interviews all kinds of people looking at law from different angle, going through different experiments in law, actually going in there and doing the things that they're researching and talking about. But for that, is there, some people say even a traffic ticket, there's a huge bond on that. Do you know anything about this? Like there's that even with a single traffic ticket, there's financial instruments created around it. I don't know if you've heard of this or not, and I have no idea, or if it's credible or whatever. But and then the other thing I'll say, since this is innerskilled.com and it's supposed to be about inner work and meditation, I will just say why I invited Kirk on here today is because, ideally we will all work internally, and, and well, kind of things, inner work where, a lot of it sounds a little bit crazy, but um, certain things happen when we do inner work that other things in our external world will kind of align and happen like that. Let's see if I can give an example. So if I have some kind of really emotional issue, right, and then I actually go inside and work on that, or maybe with the help of a therapist, then my whole life is going to change. First my internal world will change, and then I'll start trickling out to my relationships with my friends and family, and then their circle of friends. And so that, I feel, is the really way forward. But not everybody's going to do that. So there's external ways that we can do in the meantime. And I think it's fascinating what Kirk's found out about the legal system. And so I want to know more about the Flynn family, what they're actually doing in court. It's a pretty big claim here, Kirk. You say, I finally figured out how the legal system works. Well, I would love for you to start breaking it down for me.
Right.
What's false and what's real, and yeah, that I think that's the biggest line that I'd like to go into here.
Well, I would like to bring Thomas Jefferson into the discussion. In the Declaration of Independence, there's a lot of jewel wisdom, but one of the statements that really stands out to me is when Jefferson wrote, "He, speaking of the king, has combined with others, speaking of Parliament and the colonial governors, he has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution." Now, the Declaration was written in 1776. The U.S. Constitution didn't come until 1787, 11 years later. So when Jefferson's writing this, he's not talking about the United States Constitution. He's not talking about the Articles of Confederation. He's talking about English common law. That's what was guiding the colony, just simply English common law. So, has subjected us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of, here it comes, pretended legislation. This is a tremendous sentence that Americans need to understand what it's talking about. Because I see what's happened in our country today is they've put a new jurisdiction on it. We want common law jurisdiction. When you go into the courts, you're in something called statutory jurisdiction. Now, it goes by many different names. Some people call it Admiralty Court, Commerce Court. There's other names for it.
Law of the sea, right?
Maritime.
Yeah, maritime. Yeah.
But it's all statutory. The state can pass any laws any statutes that it wishes, and they become legal and binding upon the people who submit to that jurisdiction. However, if you don't submit to that jurisdiction and you demand common law and you know how to get it, it changes things markedly. Look, if you harm someone, statutory jurisdiction and common law jurisdiction move together. But if you haven't done violation to anybody, like with a traffic ticket, then if you go into statutory jurisdiction, don't argue the Constitution. Don't argue about your right to travel. No. I told you earlier, I learn law by doing law. Now, I've made some stupid mistakes along the way. I got one of the rolling stops and I lost again, and this time I got mad and I said, I'm not paying it. Well, another few months later, or a couple of years probably, I got another rolling stop ticket. But now, wait a minute, you're driving on a suspended license. That's a misdemeanor, and you're going to go to court and you could get a year in jail and you could get a heavy fine. All right, so I'm in there defending myself, and I objected to something that the district attorney said, and the judge said, well, Mr. Beck, you're going to have to explain that. So I started to explain, and he said, wait a minute, stop. Mr. Beck, you're bringing up some very valid point. Nevertheless, that's not why we're here today. You should have brought that up in a pre-trial motion. Now, what he just told me was worth a year's of law school, because you don't win arguing the Constitution in a statutory jurisdiction. You have to bring it in by pretrial motion. And if you do it properly, you can end up with these words. Therefore, Your Honor, I move for dismissal. And just get it over with. And that's the wonderful thing. Now, in conjunction with that, the Flynns taught me about the affidavit. What is an affidavit? A lot of people don't know what it is. But basically, it's just a declaration of truth signed before a notary, subject to the legality of perjury. If I'm saying things that are wrong, I can go to jail for this. And then I put it in the mail, and I send it by certified mail to my opponent so that they have ample time to deal with it. Because I said earlier, I have a gift for the listeners. What I'm basically going to give them is a template that we use, which has the first paragraph that specifies to the recipient that their lawful responsibility to answer, whether it's a legislator that makes laws, a law enforcement agent that enforces a law, or a judge who's interpreting the law, or a corporate official. This works for corporations also, school board members, all kinds of people who take an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. They're under a binding oath, and their responsibility includes you must answer. Now, the Bill of Rights lays out a lot of defensive actions, things that we can use to our advantage. But in the First Amendment, there are 5 rights. Most Americans can say, well, right to free speech and religion, and they get kind of hung up after that. Hey, the one they miss more often than not, right to petition for redress of grievances. This is, to my knowledge, the best enforcement action in the entire Constitution and Bill of Rights. If I send a government official an affidavit specifying, according to constitutional law, proper evidence, facts, and truth, that everything in my affidavit is true, then they have a responsibility to answer. And that's what's in the final paragraph. These words are very telling to a government official. I think they hate to see these words. You have 30 days to rebut with being specific, everything in my affidavit. Otherwise, everything in it can be used against you, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Jones, against you in any court in the United States. They're not used to getting. When I got a rolling stop after my opportunity with the judge. He set me straight. I did exactly what the Flynns told me to do. I wrote the deputy a letter explaining to him what he did wrong. Now, this is just a letter. Nevertheless, he had to sign for it. He's not used to getting letters from people, maybe an irate letter, but mine wasn't irate. I'm just simply telling what he did wrong according to common law. He didn't respond. So after 30 days, I turned it into an affidavit. Now, he may have thrown the letter away, but I don't think he threw the affidavit away. I think he took the affidavit up to legal, and legal came back and basically said, just let him go. I don't think he explained to the deputy all that was in my affidavit from a lawful point of view. He just simply said, you're not worth it, let him go. Because when I went to court, he showed up And when I went to court, I always take a witness with me. And he looked at me and I looked at him. He gave a piece of paper to the bailiff, and the bailiff gave it to the judge. And within a couple of minutes, the judge said, "Mr. Beck, are you here? If Mr. Beck, your case has been dropped, you may leave." Now, this is after being in court maybe 5, 6, 7 times and always losing. I just won. Now, what I tell people is you'll never find out why you won. They'll never tell you why. You're just going to win. And that began a process which now I have 5. I have 5 of these wins. And it's all using the same process of looking at what the law says, understanding that from a common law perspective, what they're doing is wrong. They're infringing upon my rights, and therefore I need to notify them what they're doing wrong. I have lots of patriot friends that say, "I have a right to do this, I have a right to do that," and blah, blah, blah. And I say, "Well, yeah, but have you notified your potential adversary?" "No." "Well, that's your problem. Hey, wouldn't you want to be notified? Then do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Notify your adversary." So that's what I do. When I learned this, and one of the first things I did, I went to my state assemblywoman and my state senator, and I went in to talk to them because I always ask government officials this question. According to the Declaration of Independence, what is the purpose of government? And they never get it right, Josh. Unbelievable. Somebody could be in office for 2 decades and still doesn't know why they're supposed to be there. Because when I ask them that question, they always say, in varying forms, "I'm here to protect the people." I said, "Well, that's not true. I'm sure you know these words: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Do you know what comes right after that?" "No." "That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That's why you go to Sacramento. You go up there to pass laws that are constitutional that protect my rights. You don't go up there to pass statutes that abrogate, eliminate, trample on my rights." But they do it all the time.
Well, yeah, it's there's so much money involved in all this now, and the people that reelect them, the people that make the laws, right? There's super PACs that are anonymous where the money's coming from. So Kurt, I want to ask you a few things. So, what, well, I would just say being a civics teacher, right, has its benefits. So you know this, you know the Constitution, you know the Declaration of Independence forward and backwards, right? So that's very helpful when dealing with this, I'd imagine, on a higher level than most people are usually think about dealing with it on. Now you're when you say what was I going to say? When you say it was he infringed upon your rights on a rolling stop, I'm interested in common law. What are you talking about there? What right do you have? And then maybe you need to explain the situation. Was it just like a routine traffic stop? I think that's the first one. And government, the etymology, from what I understand, though, the word itself, although it doesn't really make sense to isolate it, govern means to control, and ment means mind. So it's kind of mind control, you know. And we don't see in America, at least right now yet, knock wood, from what I understand, law enforcement officials roaming the streets with, fully automatic weapons all the time, right? Saying, "You stay in line or I'm going to shoot you." We don't see that yet, but in some third world countries, you do. America controls the minds of the populace in a way, right? There's like a soft power where things are just kind of understood. There's lots of programming in the media. There's a lot of financial consequences. So people are kind of controlled in many different ways other than at an immediate barrel of a gun, like there is in some nations, right? So there's a lot of corruption behind closed doors. A lot of things are, there's a huge elaborate thing to basically, if you just pay a high powered lawyer, right? And you can get off the hook. I mean, maybe I'm oversimplifying here, but you pay to play, money can buy you pretty much any of this standard stuff, right? If you have enough money.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe I'm speaking too much in generalities here, but I just wanted to throw that out there. But I want to ask you about this routine traffic stop and how the common law right was broached.
The Ninth Amendment to the Constitution says basically, we've listed all these rights. It doesn't mean there aren't many others. So the Ninth Amendment, there's many court decisions, Supreme Court decisions, that specify you have a right to travel. If they fine you, if they put taxes upon it, they're limiting your rights. Now, I'm always quick to point out there are rules of the law, of the road. If you violate the rules of the road, then you have to pay up. If I cause an accident because I'm I'm too close to somebody and I hit their brakes and I pile into them, then I have insurance. I'm worthy to pay up if I have that, if I cause a problem. If there's a victim and I'm responsible for it, then I have to pay up. It's just that I've had one speeding ticket in my entire life, and that was in Montana when the speed limit, due to the oil embargo, reduced the speed limits to 55. In Montana, I think I was going 60 or 65, and I got my one speeding ticket. I don't drink, so I'm not a threat in that respect. So speeding and DUIs are two of the biggest reasons why people cause trouble for other people. The idea that government, we have a system here where basically the Constitution was created for the purpose of controlling government. That's what's different about the United States, is that we had a mindset among the founding fathers, that we want a system of checks and balances to control government. But all of that is dependent upon an educated population. And not just educated, but have a little bit of guts to stand up for what you know is right. Without those, the republic will fall. One of the founding fathers said, if the American people are not moral, they're not considerate, then it can't exist. The republic will fall. And the republic has largely fallen because we see so many people talking about democracy. We're not a democracy. The Federalist Papers wrote scorchingly against the idea of democracy. We're a republic based upon the ideas of law, a blind justice that treats all people the same. I recognize that we had flaws in the Constitution. We treated black people less than white people. We treated women less so than men. But that was the 1800s. That was the 1700s. We've changed a lot since then, and we've become a much better world in respect of how we treat each other racially. Regardless of what people want to say, America is a much less racist nation than it was 100 years ago.
Well, I agree. Yeah.
But to get to the traffic stop, I have the right to travel, and what I pointed out to the police officer, the deputy sheriff, was that you, deputy sheriff, can make a lawful arrest three things. If you're working on a warrant, you're serving a warrant, you can arrest me. If I also, you can arrest me if you're working on a verifiable complaint that came from another person. And also, if you see me actually commit a crime, you can make an arrest. But the Supreme Court of California said a traffic stop is an infraction, it's not a crime. I don't get a jury trial because it's just an infraction. So you, Deputy Sheriff, have actually made a false arrest because none of those three actions exist in this situation. Secondly, we have something called legal fiction. A word is stated, is defined in the law, and we have to live by it. A driver is someone who's involved in commerce. A vehicle is something that's involved in commerce. When I get in my automobile to travel to the grocery store, I'm not involved in commerce. The Department of Motor Vehicles manual has to do with commerce. I'm not in commerce. I'm just traveling. I'm under common law jurisdiction. That's what was in my affidavit. Simple statements of fact, which the legal department at the sheriff's department decided, let's just let this one go. It's not worth hassling. And that's what happened. When you hit them with the law, they just simply back off and go get the rest of the 99% of the people who don't know what this guy knows.
Well, it is. It's a huge thing, from what I understand. The legal definition, the legal language, the legalese, it is really what it's all about, right? And it's defined by Black's Law Dictionary, right? And so you don't have this. You haven't done this thing where I've heard other people where they get rid of their license plates and they make their own driver's license, and they consider it their personal conveyance, and they just live to have cops pull them over, and so they can be tested with their knowledge and go to court and get in situations where they can, test the law and however they're. So it's just, it blows my mind. And for me to do anything like this, I don't have the confidence, so I leave it to people like you who are, I wouldn't say an experiment, but like they really care about this. They're really studying, and they know their stuff, and they care, and they're doing it for all kinds of reasons, right? I will say your comments about an informed populace is quite different than it was even 30, 40 years ago. Now we see the explosion of the internet, and then we have so much media that's watered down, dumbed down, and bought off, like serving their paymasters. Basically, it's what the mainstream media is now. I'd say whoever pays is what they're going to support, the agendas of those who pay. And then you have all these other things online, which there's great information online, but there's also a lot of discernment needed, right? And a lot of people aren't skilled in discernment. Then we have the whole intelligence apparatus, and that is, we don't know what we don't know, because a lot of it is secret. And there's so many dirty tricks, so many psychological operations going on. And it takes quite a workout to keep on top of all this, and have to do due diligence. The other requirement, now remind me of what you were, the other requirement was, the moral thing. So this is where inner work, like meditation, prayer if you're Christian, contemplative prayer, and working on, our personality, our past traumas, things like this can help in seeing the importance of morality and ethics, that I think it all boils down to non-harming to me. Of course we have a right to defend ourselves. We never have the right to aggress upon another, to initiate aggression upon another, but we do have the right to defend ourselves. And so this is, I think it's hugely important in what you said. Now, the one thing I'm still curious about before we start wrapping up here is the Flynns themselves. How much can you say about that? What got them into this? what is their kind of purpose for doing this? I mean, it sounds very, very helpful. And why do you think this kind of simple method of an affidavit has been not more well known too? What kind of work do they do? What kind of other work do they do besides the things you mentioned too?
Well, they've been involved in real estate. I know that. I don't know their history very well. I just know that when they told me that they have 10,000 victories, I thought that's hyperbole. Well, wait a minute. I've gotten five now. I'm just one guy. They've been doing this for 6 decades. I believe them when they say they've got 10,000 victories. Now, I will say this, from the only negative, they're very negative about the American people. I mean, they spend way too much time talking about how gutless, how stupid the American people are, and I disagree with them. I know that see my whole thing is I know enough about history to know that the Revolutionary War was won by less than 10% of the people. 90% of the people were either loyalists, sitting it out. So when we have elections, I don't get that excited about elections because I realize this is for the herd. No, the real victory is when people understand the law and they stand behind it and they work hard. Understand something. Most people can win without ever going to court. I had to go to court to learn. Now I'm telling people, just fill out the affidavit, send it to them. Let's see what happens. Let's see if they start backing off. One of my victories was we had that woman, the young lady that was my assemblywoman. I walked in and explained to her what we're doing, and I told her your job is to defend our rights, not trample on them. 6 months later, she sponsored a bill that was going to be trampling on my pastor's right to free speech. We hit her with the affidavit, and eventually the statute was pulled. It never was signed into law. It was all done through the mail. We didn't have to go down and stand out in front of her office and put banners up. We just hit her with a lot of affidavits, and she just backed off. They're doing a much better job in Massachusetts right now. I've run into some people out there that are doing it, and the Massachusetts legislature recently convened, and the speaker said, "This is the least productive year that we've had." Good! Because you were getting hit with all these notifications and affidavits that you were outside the law, and you backed off on a lot of your statutes and decided not to push them. And that's what happens when a small group of Americans start pushing back using the common law, using the oath of office, using the affidavit, and if necessary, as I've done, we'll take you into small claims court. I took Best Buy into small claims court. They told me I had to wear a mask. Well, long story short, we took them into small claims court, and shortly thereafter they stopped for enforcing the mask mandate, which is not a law.
Yeah, so these are really good points, and I will emphasize that if people are going to do this affidavit, to really look at their heart too, and where this comes from, and educate oneself on common law. Right? I mean, the template's great, and I appreciate you sharing that with folks. But learn common law too. That's a big one. Go ahead. You want to say something? Yeah.
I had a conversation with a police officer. Now, this guy was hard-nosed. I said to him, "Let me explain to you what common law is." What is it? I said, "You're walking down the street and you look across the street and there's two men mugging a woman. What are you going to do?" He said, "Based upon my understanding of the law today, I just keep walking." I said, "Really? Let me change that slightly. That woman across the street is your mother. Now what are you going to do?" And of course, he has to backtrack. I said, "That's common law. Common law is you treat your brother, your stranger, as your brother." And that's one of the beautiful things. Josh, we heard so much over the last few years, especially with what came out of the election of 2020. the Republicans and Trump were taking cases to court, and the judges kept coming back with, you lack standing. You lack standing. You lack standing. We're not going to listen to you because you lack standing. Hey, that's statutory jurisdiction. Common law jurisdiction, I have standing. Josh, if they come after you, I'm in California and I find out about it, common law says, I stand with Josh. And I might have to do it by mail. I can't do it in person. But that affidavit can come from all over the country. I have people doing affidavits on our Attorney General in Colorado and in the state of Washington, state of Massachusetts. They understand standing. In standing, we can come to our brother or sister's support no matter where. You know, when you
United we
stand before
stand.
a judge, when you stand
United
before
we
a
stand,
judge,
right? Yeah, yeah.
when you stand before a judge, the judge will often say, Mr. Beck, do you understand the charges? My response now is, no, I don't stand under your jurisdiction.
Understand.
You're trying to put me under jurisdiction by saying understand.
Mm.
Now, all of this takes place preferably pre-trial motion.
Mm.
But nevertheless, it's still common law. It's still the process of what does common sense say?
Yeah, exactly.
That's,
And one's heart, you know, after it's, you can get to the real heart when you care, you know, care plays into this too, and not just greed and ill will. So have you heard about, and I will say with that, which you said earlier about you don't agree with their assessment on Americans. And I would say, regardless of whether their assessment on Americans is accurate or not, I will say it's not helpful to start throwing like making a straw man of a nation's people, and then, you know, destroying the straw man there. You know, it's a fallacy when you paint people in that light. It's not helpful, really. You know, you kind of. So I will say that, yeah.
it's a waste of
So I don't really need to agree at one side or the other on that. It's just painting that picture, and it's not helpful. So what our actions are what matter, you know, what we say and how we act with intent is what matters. So, and then we have individual level, collective level too. So have you heard though about this, your status and stating a claim? Is that what it is? There's a legal terminology. One's status is a huge, and I don't know exactly what that means. Maybe that means like a citizen or a common man, or then we hear things about man on the land and how that's got shot down. I mean, we could dive in. I'm actually not educated enough to. I just have these little keywords here and there that I've heard a little bit about. But it's to me, it's very deep and complex.
exactly.
Going from these, you know, going from common law and statutory law, it's in every single word matters, and how, like, in their definitions and knowing all that. It's a huge amount of knowledge that has to be involved in this to have any kind of, I guess, efficacy of the outcome. And it's way over my head, most of it. So, but I think you can just maybe touch on that really briefly, and then we can. Yeah.
Very briefly. It's not necessary.
Okay.
Just put it aside. Stick to the Constitution. Stick to the common law. And just always notify your adversary. They have a responsibility to answer. They're under an oath. It's interesting that Jack and Margie Flynn have probably put out thousands of affidavits, either them directly or people like me. And I agree with them. I've had attorneys, I've gotten on the phone and talked to attorneys, and they say, what you're saying is stupid. It doesn't make, it's just ridiculous. All right. I'll tell you what, I'll send you an affidavit. I'm going to sign mine under threat of perjury. You just come back and do the same. You refute what's in mine with your signature at the bottom there, and then I'll listen to you. But if all you're going to do is just berate me on the telephone, I'm not listening. I want you to match my affidavit with your own affidavit, and they never have. They do not, because they know, attorneys are smart enough to know if they put it in writing and it's notarized, it can be used against them. So they like to talk a lot, they like to berate us, but basically the affidavit speaks for us. I don't need to know all this other stuff about straw man. I just simply live by the Constitution and by the common law, treating a government official not as my leader, but as my public servant, and I treat my public servant with respect. I treat all people decent.
I think that is a good place to wrap up here. And absolutely, we're all deserving of dignity and respect, and respect comes along with that. You know, if that's not there, then we have bigger problems in any kind of legal system. I feel, you know, our lack of legal system, or government or lack of government, you know, or deviation from the Constitution maintaining. If we don't have a dignity and respect, you know, I don't know how anything else is gonna take precedence over that. So I really appreciate you coming on today, Kirk Beck. I learned a lot from you, and it's amazing that this isn't more well known. And yeah, so and thank you for the free gift. So why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you, if you're open to that, the book you have coming out, how people can get this template for the affidavit, anything else you want to promote, and then leave a message with the listening audience here, what you'd like to leave everybody with.
First of all, Josh, thank you so much for having me on this. It's been really a wonderful experience over the last 2 months. I've been talking to people across the country in these podcasts, and I really think this is the way we've got to get the word out. I promised a gift. If you go to affidavitsecrets.com/Josh, affidavit singular, affidavit secrets plural, .com/Josh, you will get the template. We also are offering to this audience a 50% discount on the course, the affidavit course that's available by going through that same website. So that's basically it. The book I'm working on it's been finished, but we're going through a rewrite on it. It's called Officer Hanson, Compassion in Blue. See, one of the things you and I, Josh, really agree with when I was talking with you earlier, you're really against violence. I am really against violence. I don't like to see the violence that's taking place on the street. And I met a man named Dale Brown. He's up in Detroit, and he taught me what he's teaching police officers up there. Disarm potentially violent situations using psychology and compassion, so you won't have to use your gun to kill somebody. And what really got me was when I listened to the 7 testimonials by 7 hardcore Detroit police officers, all said the same thing. Why were we not trained this way? Had we been trained this way, there would have been less people shot and far less lawsuits against Detroit PD. That was the essence. When I ran into Dale Brown, I decided I have to write a book. So the book is a lot of my own personal experiences with police, and also my friends who are the cops that have told me these different stories. And it's over 65,000 words, and I hope it's a lasting legacy that people can read and recognize, you know, compassion goes a long way in bringing about successful termination of hostility. Just learn to listen to each other more. Now, Dale Brown's people, he also teaches them martial art. So it's key. Police officers when they know 10 different ways to disarm somebody without having to use a gun, their fear factor goes way down. They don't
And there,
shoot out of fear.
and there's a huge code of honor in martial arts too,
Yeah.
right? It's code, you
Mm-hmm.
only get in a fight unless you absolutely have to, and then
Yeah.
and then they know how to do it in the right way. So yeah,
Dale Brown, one time, this is the last thing I've got to say. Dale Brown
okay.
said, in reference to a situation where uh, a person was coming to him with a club or a knife, Dale Brown would turn to police officers and say to them, "What would you do?" And more often not, because they've been taught that you take your gun out and you end it right there. And Dale Brown's response to that was, "What if the person coming to you with a gun or a knife is your own son? Would you still shoot him to kill? Or would you figure out another way to take him down without killing him?" Well, that guy is somebody's brother, he's somebody's father, he's somebody's son. And you need to treat all people the way you'd want to be treated. And that's it. That's the word I've got for your audience. We've got to learn to get along and treat people the way we want to be treated. And so much of our hostility and problems are going to go away.
Couldn't agree more. This is the golden rule, treat people how we want to be treated. It's just, and none of us want to be harmed, so we all have that in common. And so, yes, so look out for each other out there. And Kirk, I wish you well, and I wish everyone listening to this well, so we can find the kind of remedy and resolve of all the challenges we're facing internally and externally. So, yes,
Thank you.
may you all be well. Bye now.
God bless you, Josh. Bye bye.